Alright, so to load mesh into the machine, you start by taking off this knob on the outside and pulling off this wheel. And then I like to tilt it back on its side like that. And you take your mesh. Now it doesn't matter if you have the loose end coming over the top like this, or if you have it flipped where it's coming underneath. Play around with both of those and see if one works a lot better than the other. So you load it in there. Now you want to look at the center. If you have a brand new roll, this won't be an issue, but when you have a partially used one like this, make sure the end of the mesh in the middle is kind of hooked over, or it's near the axle here. That's because there's a rubber washer at the back of the axle. I'm not sure if you can see it there. And you want this mesh to be compressed into that washer when you tighten the wheel back on. Alright, so we push this in here. And this is an 8-inch roll of mesh. The wheel here fits into these two grooves. There's a groove on each roller, so you should be able to kind of pop it in there. So you've got it on the axle and in the two grooves. Throw the knob back on, and now make sure you tighten this a fair amount. What you want to do is compress that little piece of mesh into the rubber washer at the back. So when you tighten it down, you should be able to grab the mesh like this, and it shouldn't want to move around because it should be pinched right here. The mesh on the outside should be a little bit loose. That's okay. Alright, so it's loaded up and ready to dispense. So I've got a critter block clip on here. I'll probably throw a couple of these in the box. They're super handy just for keeping a roll of mesh from uncoiling when it's not in the machine. So to dispense, it's pretty straightforward. You just pull the mesh out and it'll come out of the machine. So I'll show you how to rewind now. So you just grab this knob and turn it. Oops. Alright, so what it'll do is coil up the middle of the roll first, and then it'll start pulling the outside in. So there you go. You can also dispense. So you can pick this up by the carrying handle here and walk around an array or something and pull the stuff out. You can set it down and pull it out and walk away from the machine. Just make sure anytime you're not holding on to it, you should put a lanyard on it or anchor it somehow to the roof, just to be safe. You can also put it on its side. You could set it on the roof like this and pull mesh away. So let's say you start attaching this end to the outside of your solar array. You could kind of start putting your attachments in and then pull this along the roof, set it down, put a few more attachments in, and kind of work your way around that way. You could also start attaching this end and then just pick this up and walk with it and go around a good chunk of the array before you start doing attachments. I'm super curious to hear how exactly you end up using it. Alright, so what else? Carrying it around, you can carry it by the side handle, the top handle. You can throw a carabiner through either of these eyelets or around the handle if you want to anchor it somewhere or hoist it up onto the roof. Keep an eye on this knob. So this is one thing where I've thought about putting a locking feature on this knob so there's no way it could come off, but I haven't done that yet, in part because it seems like when you tighten this down and compress that rubber washer, it really doesn't want to come loose. But keep an eye on it just to be safe, especially the first few times you use it. Make sure this isn't loosening somehow. I have noticed if you don't tighten this enough, let's say it's just like a little bit tight, and you start trying to rewind, see how I'm turning, I can turn the rewind knob and it can actually loosen the axle knob while I do this. So that's one way it could loosen. But if you tighten it past a certain point, it doesn't do that anymore. What else? So, okay, let's say we're starting a new job. It uses 6-inch mesh, and the last one used 8-inch. So we're just going to pull this partially used roll out and put in a 6-inch roll. Find my loose end here. Okay, you can wind up the mesh a little bit before you take it out, just so that it takes up less space. So these guys, you just take them. I like to just hook one layer and then hook like that, and you're good to go. All right, so I'll go ahead and take my knob off, pop the wheel off, and if you want, you can tilt it on its back. Sometimes the mesh catches on this threaded rod. I've put a plastic tube over part of the axle here just to try and stop that from happening. If you want to put like a 4-inch roll of mesh in here, which it should go down to 4 inches, you can't cover up the threads where this knob needs to screw on. So if you end up doing 4-inch and you need to cut this down, feel free to do that. This will just, you can slide it right off and cut it with a utility knife. Okay, so we're switching to a 6-inch roll of mesh. These rollers can slide back and forth. They move pretty easily, just push them. So we'll just kind of roughly put these where we think they're gonna go, about 2 inches further that way. This guide and the handle can also slide, and it's just kind of a friction fit. So if you just grab onto it and pull it, you can slide these back and forth. I don't know how necessary that's going to be. It's possible that you can pretty much just leave it in one place. But in a perfect world, this guide would be roughly in the center of the roll. Okay, so let's go ahead and load it in. All right, so we make sure it's all the way down against that plate. You can see that it's kind of hooked over the axle, and we'll make contact with the rubber washer back there. So that's what we want. And we'll slide these rollers just a little further. You basically want them so the groove that this plate goes in is just outside the face of the mesh. There we go. All right. So we'll push this back on, pop that in the 2 grooves, and then thread this knob on. Get it decently tight. And if we look at our guide here, you can see it's a little bit off center. Like I said, I think that's okay. What you do want to make sure is you don't want this to be crooked like that. So wherever the bottom one is, line it up with the top one. You can look at the squares of mesh to make sure you're lined up. Looks about right. And the top handle obviously is off center here, but because there's the center of weight for the mesh is in the middle of the mesh, but you've also got a bunch of weight over here for the handle. So I find that that seems to be okay. If you find it's really annoying to have this thing hang kind of crooked when you lift it, that I'd be curious to hear that. Okay, so yeah, our 6-inch is ready to go. Make sure it dispenses. Realigns. Whoops. So yeah, that's definitely something that can happen. Is if things aren't lined up right, it'll start to get off like that. Definitely let me know if that's like a persistent issue with using it. Okay, I think that's about it. All right, so thanks a lot for testing it out. Super excited to hear your feedback, and yeah, have fun with it.